Monarch, the New Phoenix Program.
Political activists and whistleblowers are being attacked with electromagnetic weapons and used as human guinea pigs in terminal experiments to force a suicide, incarceration, or death from the effects of non-ionizing radiation. For the purposes of this talk, the names of the following weapons will be considered interchangeable: the active denial system, the electromagnetic weapon, non-lethal microwave weapon, radio frequency radiation weapon. Victims of the current program are referred to as targeted individuals, TI. Political activist, a person who is active in social change movements such as civil rights, anti-war, environmental, or women's rights movement. Whistleblower, person who's reported criminal activity in powerful government agencies or corporations. INSCOM, Army Intelligence.
The active denial system shoots a beam of electromagnetic radiation in the 95 gigahertz range that heats the skin to 130 degrees Fahrenheit and feels like a red-hot iron has been applied to the skin. The ADS is a pain amplifier, engineered not to kill so the public will accept the new weapons.
Milliwave radars are see-through wall radars used by the military for house-to-house fighting. Normal building materials are completely transparent to milliwave radars, while the human body, composed mostly of water, lights up with great definition. The entire world has been turned into a fishbowl, and the American people no longer have privacy even in their own homes.
4 facts prove the case. 1. Public microwave weapons exist. Credible witnesses testify.
Persons of interest in Army intelligence. And a prior pattern of criminal behavior, all during the Cold War. The prior pattern of criminal behavior, 3 programs. 1. The Cold War Department of Defense used 500,000 U.S. citizens as human experimental subjects in nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons development programs. These crimes against humanity are known as the human guinea pig experiments. 2. Cold War-era FBI made hit lists of political activists and organizations and waged a secret dirty war on them. COINTELPRO, or Counterintelligence Program. 3. The CIA used Nazi scientists to learn how to control the human mind using drugs, torture, and hypnosis. Mind Control Ultra, or MK Ultra. Children were used as the experimental subjects to perfect this technology during the Holocaust. INSCOM is currently perfecting electromagnetic weapons on human guinea pigs, human experimental subjects being used in their own homes and workplaces. Army intelligence is neutralizing potential enemies on a hit list, political activists and whistleblowers, by using them as the experimental subjects. COINTELPRO and the human guinea pig experiments combined. INSCOM is using electromagnetic weapons to cause physical and mental trauma. Trauma is the tool used to perfect behavior modification, MK Ultra. It functions like leading a mouse through a maze, shocking it on one side and then the other. Torture-based behavior modification. Persons of interest are military intelligence officers, alleged criminals, innocent until proven guilty. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino, General Keith B. Alexander, Lieutenant Colonel John B. Alexander, General David LeCaman. Force multiplication is the military strategy that enfolds all three historical government programs, human guinea pig experiments, COINTELPRO, and MK Ultra, enfolded together with the new electromagnetic weapons development program to accomplish all three programs in one. Activists that were attacked in a traditional manner are now targeted with electromagnetic weapons, often leaving no obvious injuries. Driving targeted individuals to suicide with electromagnetic weapons is plausibly deniable. Targeted individuals who retaliate are incarcerated or forcibly committed. Long-term effects of non-ionizing radiation are leukemia, heart attack, or similar cause of death that is recorded as natural causes. Murder by heart attack or stroke or cancer is plausibly deniable, the perfect crime. This is a case based on 4 facts to avoid confusion, disinformation, and circular arguments that lead nowhere. MK Ultra engaged over 80 institutions, and the current program, Monarch, is equally complex. 4 facts are all that's necessary to convince a reasonable person that this atrocity is taking place. The name Monarch is the author's choice. The real name is unknown. 4 facts. 1. Electromagnetic weapons like the active denial system and milliwave radars are public microwave weapons. The Russians used electromagnetic weapons to attack the U.S. Embassy in Moscow in the 1950s. In response, the U.S. began a secret crash program to develop microwave weapons capabilities. 2. A criminal history. 500,000 U.S. citizens used as guinea pigs in nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons development programs. COINTELPRO hit list of political activists, and MK Ultra behavior modification experiments using drugs, torture, and hypnosis. These programs escaped detection for decades, and no perpetrators were ever punished. Three, credible witnesses have testified that they are targets of electromagnetic weapons attacks and organized stalking. The author has interviewed over 200 targets in person. Most are political activists or whistleblowers, approximately 40 years old, with a high IQ and other common factors. The targets fit a common profile. 4. Persons of interest. People who have developed electromagnetic weapons for Army intelligence since 1980. They have expressed interest in using these weapons on civilians to, quote, neuter them, unquote. They've moved the classified military weapons from the Department of Defense to the Department of Justice and into the hands of local law enforcement. Some of these personalities have taken part in a smokescreen cover-up. Lieutenant Colonel John B. Alexander has been in charge of developing non-lethal microwave weapons for the Army since 1980. He has worked at Los Alamos National Laboratory, where the atomic bomb was invented in secret. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander has a doctorate in thanatology, the study of death. He is quite literally Dr. Death. 4 facts. The case reduced to a minimum with a threshold of a civil trial. Evidence is used to convince a reasonable person, not beyond a reasonable doubt, but 51% probability. There's more evidence, free online, in books and films, government documents, military science papers, the non-lethal scientists, their scientific papers, their patents, their careers, authoritative magazine and newspaper articles, and the testimony of experts and witnesses. Once again, the case is based on 4 facts. Public microwave weapons exist. There's a prior pattern of criminal behavior. Credible witnesses have testified, and persons of interest in military intelligence.
The Russians attacked the U.S. Embassy in Moscow with electromagnetic weapons in the 1950s. The U.S. began a secret crash program to develop electromagnetic weapons capabilities. Today, the active denial system and milliwave radars are public weapons. But where are the electromagnetic weapons that kill?
The United States has developed lethal electromagnetic weapons, but has kept them secret. If the American people saw human beings killed by heart attack or cancer, they might object to these microwave weapons as immoral and dangerous. Logical arguments. If the U.S. had a secret weapon that could kill anyone anywhere and leave no physical evidence, and only a select few knew that these weapons existed, wouldn't they be tempted to use the weapons for their own selfish purposes? The power to kill anyone, anywhere, is an absolute power that corrupts absolutely. Throughout history, when men have had absolute power over other men without consequences, then torture and mass murder were the rule of the day. If the Department of Defense has a long history of criminal behavior targeting political activists, and the current targets are political activists who testify that they are being attacked with weapons similar to the active denial system, why shouldn't Army intelligence be investigated? Cold War Department of Defense used 500,000 U.S. citizens as guinea pigs in nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons experiments. Electromagnetic weapons are the latest and greatest weapons coming out of the government weapons lab. Do you think that they would stop this behavior at the end of the Cold War out of a sudden newfound sense of morality? If they could continue without the risk of getting caught, wouldn't they be tempted? Thinking abstractly, if a killer has tortured and or murdered 500,000 people and he got away with it, and then You gave him an electromagnetic weapon that could kill anyone, anywhere, without the risk of getting caught. What do you think he would do? Would he just stop out of a newfound sense of morality? The Russians attacked the U.S. Embassy in Moscow in the 1950s with electromagnetic weapons, and it was kept secret until the 1970s. If the Russians could get away with using microwave weapons against the United States, what chance would a single individual have against this kind of state-sponsored high-tech terrorism? The Russians, for decades, have had radio frequency radiation weapons that can kill goats at the range of half a mile. Were the Russians the only ones smart enough to invent electromagnetic weapons? Innocent people are being attacked with these weapons in their homes. They are living a nightmare that you cannot imagine. The weapons employ a decoy and deception strategy, making it nearly impossible to tell who is attacking you and exactly how the attack is being accomplished. If these classified electromagnetic weapons were public, you might believe the victims. As it stands now, they have no chance. Persons of interest in charge of electromagnetic weapons development for the Army since 1980. Persons who have worked at Los Alamos, where the atomic bomb was invented in secret. They've expressed interest in MK-Ultra and admiration, and interest in using these weapons to modify behavior and, quote, neuter people, unquote. They have advocated using the weapons to attack civilians in their own homes, and they have been instrumental in moving the classified military anti-personnel weapons from the Department of Defense to the Department of Justice and into the hands of local law enforcement. These individuals are psychological warfare experts with over 45 years counterinsurgency warfare experience. Army intelligence sells superpowers online, saying, in effect, if you give us your credit card for $3,000, we will teach you the secrets of remote viewing. Remote viewing is the theoretical ability to see on the other side of the world and to spy on the Russians in their underground bases, for instance, or to find their submarines hidden on the bottom of the ocean. These kinds of activities are remote viewing. Should we believe the Army intelligence officers, or should we be skeptical and look more closely at what is going on? Army intelligence officers and government physicists who invent non-lethal microwave weapons technologies are in charge of these government Department of Defense weapons programs, and they are also promoting remote viewing. Remote viewing does not go together with Department of Defense weapons development programs. It does go together, however, with the strategy of the big lie. First used on D-Day, Army intelligence used the big lie to create a fake army around General Patton, including fake radio traffic, inflatable tanks, inflatable planes, and landing craft. The Nazis were so fooled that even weeks after the invasion at Normandy, the officers were still holding their Panzer tank divisions in reserve, waiting for the real invasion to take place at Calais. The big lie is misdirection on a mass scale. It effectively worked perfectly to screen the invasion of 8,000 ships and hundreds of thousands of men. Is the remote viewing hoax the next big lie? It's important to understand who we're dealing with. J. Edgar Hoover ran the FBI. He had files on politicians about their sex lives and their high crimes and misdemeanors. Hoover personally wrote Dr. Martin Luther King a blackmail letter in an attempt to force King to commit suicide. Hoover ran the FBI for 50 years and died in office. This was unprecedented for one man to control such a powerful government agency for so long. This is the power that we confront today. Men too powerful to defy or anyone, even a congressman or president, might be politically destroyed or otherwise. The power to kill human beings in a manner that looks like a natural cause of death is the ability to get away with murder. That is what we are faced with, the ability to kill anyone with plausible deniability. If Hoover had had electromagnetic weapons, he would have used them on Dr. Martin Luther King. You would have read one day that King had died suddenly of a heart attack, or cancer, or even suicide. Dr. King's movement would have stalled out and died out before it had gained sufficient momentum within society to succeed. Reporters have independently corroborated what is being stated here. Specifically, Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, has a secret weapon, a revolutionary breakthrough in electronic warfare that will forever transform how war is waged. A secret weapon that can track and kill anyone in their area of operations day or night in any weather. JSOC has a death squad with a hit list carrying out assassinations outside of the command of civilian or military oversight. These charges are the same charges made by the political activists and whistleblowers, that they are being attacked by classified military weapons similar to the active denial system. Electromagnetic weapons are called Revolution in Military Affairs, RMA. This is a military science term. Examples of an RMA are the invention of gunpowder and the invention of nuclear weapons. The invention of gunpowder meant that all older weapons were suddenly obsolete, and a few hundred men, armed with cannon and firearm, could take over entire nations and turn the existing political, economic, and social order upside down. If the Nazis had invented nuclear weapons in 1940, with 100 atomic bombs, they could have taken over the entire world and created a fascist state world government. Today, battlefield weapons are primarily shells and missiles that travel at approximately 3,000 miles per hour, while electromagnetic weapons and lasers travel at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second, and have publicly demonstrated the ability to destroy shells and missiles in flight. History repeats itself. To understand Monarch, one must understand two earlier programs by the FBI and the CIA, COINTELPRO and MKUltra. COINTELPRO targeted the civil rights, anti-war, environmental, and even the women's movement. The theory of counterinsurgency warfare dictates that infiltration and psychological operations be carried out against dissidents and dissident groups in normal times before any mass movement can develop. This means in practice that a secret war must be waged upon civil society, namely the people who are trying to create a better world. The favorite tactic of the FBI is the snitch jacket, where suspicion of being an informant is used against legitimate leaders. In practice, an FBI undercover agent would join Dr. King's inner circle, and he would use false documentary evidence to make it appear that Dr. King was himself an FBI informant. The group would break apart from within. From outside, the FBI would routinely pressure landlords, targets to evict them, and they would visit and pressure employers to fire the targets. COINTELPRO went silent in the late 1970s and restarted again in the 1980s. MK-Ultra. Dr. Sidney Gottlieb ran MK-Ultra for the CIA. He used Nazi scientists and their state-of-the-art mind-control technology perfected in the concentration camps. The Nazis had used drugs, torture, and hypnosis to break the mind in order to control it. MK-Ultra instigated trauma on a subject at 3 years old to cause the personality to split or dissociate in order to shield the mind from the memory of painful events that might very well destroy the mind itself. This partitioning functions much like the partitioning of a computer hard drive. The Three Faces of Eve is the true story of multiple personality disorder accidentally created by childhood abuse. Trauma causes the dissociation. MK-Ultra works best when the trauma is repeated around 6 years of age. Later, the subject's IQ test can be measured to determine if the child can be trained in espionage. Later, the subject can be hypnotized and used for operations, and afterwards have no memory of events and be consciously aware only of a sense of lost time. A person under hypnosis is like a sleepwalker who remembers nothing. The Department of Defense has developed electromagnetic weapons that interact with the human central nervous system without electrodes. They have gone back and retroactively classified many scientific papers. However, there are still hundreds of public patents for electromagnetic weapons that both interact with and attack the human central nervous system. The private sector is reinventing the wheel. Technology primarily is being developed for the disabled and for gamers. Toyota makes a wheelchair that can be controlled by paraplegics with mental commands.
The motive to kill loyal political opposition stems from the view of dissent against the Vietnam War as treason. This philosophy is stated very clearly in the Mind War paper, written by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. The claim of sabotage by domestic political enemies as a reason for losing the Vietnam War was once a borderline view, but has become the premier narrative of the neocons. This is the exact same claim made by the German army after World War I. German military officers and conservatives began to blame Jews, socialists, and communists who had, quote, stabbed them in the back on the home front, unquote. Army intelligence is charging their political opponents with treason and using this as an excuse to assassinate them.
In World War II, the U.S. Army created the Military Intelligence Division, the MID. It was a very small first official spy force attached to the U.S. military. It used a force multiplier called the APL, the American Protective League, consisting of 250,000 vigilantes, a vigilante army used to, quote, keep watch on suspicious activities and to suppress anti-war resistance. The vigilante leaders were made official officers in the MID in an attempt to control the worst of the illegal activity by the vigilante army. TI victims are victims of organized stalking. Other terms are gang stalking, mobbing, street theater, gaslighting. TIs are victims of a smear campaign designed to drive out undesirable elements out of the community. It systematically uses low-level attacks against the targets. cursing them in public everywhere they go, bump and block techniques, invading the personal space, forcing arguments, starting physical fights, forcing car wrecks, vandalism and break-ins, blasting sound attacks constantly, a symphony of 10 or 20 attacks a day that artificially pegs the stress level at the target at an unsustainable level. The TI is unable to sleep. This technique might be termed the death of 1,000 cuts.
The term mobbing was used by the KKK to describe their activities that drove their enemies from town to town. These tactics sound very much like the biscuit teams, a campaign of psychological operation designed by a doctor, a psychologist, and an interrogation specialist to target the interrogation suspect's cultural and personality weaknesses, to individually design a campaign of psychological operations. Biscuit teams use many stress factors, piled one on top of the other, used over time, such as isolation, temperature stress, such as extreme cold or hot, forced stress positions, constant light or dark, sleep and sensory deprivation, sound attacks, sexual humiliation, threats of violence, odors, and other non-conventional means to slowly break down the human mind without using traditional torture.
The Russians in 1960 began to force their political dissidents into mental institutions and forced them to take powerful drugs to destroy them. Previously, our communist enemies had imprisoned, tortured, and executed their dissidents at will. However, by 1960, public opinion in the world was too important for them to ignore. Therefore, they began to use different techniques. A U.S. Army study in 1972 is nearly 200 pages long, entitled Controlled Offensive Behavior, USSR. It studies the torture techniques of our communist enemies, including isolation, temperature, light, sound, sleep and sensory deprivation, threats of violence, microwave weapons, and other techniques to break down minds and purposely create psychiatric cases. It is clear from examining current practice that the United States has adopted our communist enemies' techniques. This is 1960-era electromagnetic weapon, a LIDA, L-I-D-A. The TIs will be called crazy. This has happened to the human guinea pigs previously, often. COINTELPRO and MK Ultra make targeted individuals look crazy as a specific method for keeping these illegal programs a secret. The human radiation experiments were a subset of the human guinea pig experiments. This is one man's story out of 500,000. In 1947, Mr. Elmer Allen was injected with plutonium in the left leg in a San Francisco hospital, and the next day his leg was amputated. He told a friend and his family doctor back home in Italy, Texas, that he thought he might have been used as a human guinea pig. His best friend avoided him afterwards, and his family doctor classified him as a paranoid schizophrenic in his medical records. Mr. Allen's family did not find out the truth until years after he had died. In 1995, the U.S. government held hearings, but no one was punished. The hearings functioned as a whitewash. COINTELPRO used the strategy of depicting the targeted individual as paranoid when they claimed that the government was following them, harassing them, and systematically sabotaging and destroying their lives. Political activist Abby Hoffman said that he was being targeted, But no one believed him, not the press, not his friends, not his family. Eventually, friends of Hoffman broke into the FBI offices and stole government documents that proved that the FBI was spending approximately half of its time on COINTELPRO. MK-Ultra survivors still live in the shadows today, and even if they tell a doctor that they were drugged, tortured in government labs to induce multiple personality disorder, then they can be sure that they will be permanently classified as paranoid schizophrenics in their medical records. This blowback functions to keep the worst of MK-Ultra secret even today. Targeted individuals will be smeared as tinfoil hat and mass hysteria. This is because all the previous victims of all the other illegal government programs have systematically suffered the same fate. To say that this cannot happen here, or that something like this big, cannot be kept quiet, is patently untrue. The Department of Defense ran these illegal government programs completely off the public radar for more than 50 years. The MK-Ultra hearings were only the tip of the iceberg, and if the truth came out, the CIA would never recover. Airtight proof is impossible to get under the circumstances and can only be procured by breaking into Fort Meade Army Intelligence Headquarters and stealing government documents. Even this may not work. Political activists stole COINTELPRO files, but no one went to jail. COINTELPRO went dark for a few years, then began again in the early 1980s. Airtight proof is unreasonable and impossible under the circumstances. A civil trial, proving 50% probability, proving what a reasonable person would logically conclude given the facts. This is a solid case. These weapons are proven to exist. There is a prior pattern of the same criminality. Credible witnesses have testified, and persons of interest who developed electromagnetic weapons, written about how to use the weapons, advocated using the weapons, given the weapons to the police, and participated in a smokescreen cover-up. It's clear that a new strategy is necessary. A special prosecutor, a congressional commission, and a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It may be that electromagnetic weapons are too powerful for our 800-year-old legal system to deal with. Military force may be the only answer. If so, the author recommends that the 704th Military Intelligence Brigade be disarmed using all necessary force. In the aftermath, it is the author's desire to advocate for the 4 goals in order to heal the damage done to our nation and world and to ensure that these crimes will never happen again. 1. End the secret dirty war. 2. Domestic political reform. 3. End the nuclear arms race. 4. A scientific and humanitarian initiative. A new Marshall Plan designed to displace militarism as the driving social and economic force in the world today. Please join us at MarshallPlanPAC.org.